to the Recovering Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Charles Van Loucks. Today, I'd like to talk about the stigma of addiction. Now, I think that this topic is something very important that keeps a lot of people kind of stuck, and I remember that feeling myself of, feeling like I had to hide my addiction, right? Feeling like I had to hide the fact that I was in recovery, the whole thing. But I want to point out a very important difference here, right? Being in active addiction is not good, right? Obviously. But when we step over into recovery, that's a good thing. That's a positive thing, right? Now, sometimes our means of getting to that moment of clarity and getting into recovery might not be the most positive, right? We lose a job, we get arrested, we whatever it is, But I think the act of actually looking in the mirror, right? Knowing that something is going on with us that we don't like and having the courage to look back in that mirror and do something about it. That's huge. That's huge. And that's something to be very proud of because the fact is, the majority of people out in the world, they just sort of ignore their problems and just kind of hope they go away. They don't take these hard steps and do this hard work that we do in recovery. So, I think this all kind of ties into, recovering out loud as well, because, when we're in active addiction, sometimes we hide it, right? Sometimes we have kind of a double life sort of thing going on, But I believe when we cross that threshold into being in recovery, I think it's important to really recover out loud and really voice that to people, Um, I'll tell you, in my, coming up on 10 years in recovery, I have yet to meet a person who has had anything negative to say about my recovery or the fact that I'm in recovery. And I got the line ready for him, I got the line ready for that person, but I have yet to meet a person like that. And what I find is when I start talking to people about recovery and addiction and the work I do and all that, um, people, they have a family member, right, who's in recovery or should be, right? They have a friend, a coworker, whatever, right? I have found that especially these days, people are a lot more, positive about recovery and about, hearing people's stories and all that kind of stuff. Now, I do think that it's important to know that, if we do choose to recover out loud and share our story and, talk to people about our recovery and all that, I think it is important to realize that, sometimes people who aren't, you know, in recovery themselves, or they've never been through addiction or anything like that, I'm just going to call them normies, right? Sometimes those normies, they might not necessarily know how to respond to what we have to offer, our story, right? But that doesn't mean that they can't be good supports. That doesn't mean that we should, hide our recovery from those people or anything like that, right? I think if anything, it's a beautiful moment for a conversation, I think that's a really nice moment to be able to say, hey, this is what I've been through, and I want to share it with you. I want to open up. I want to have this, truly transparent relationship with you. I want to let you in, That's a beautiful thing. And I think that being able to, lead that support person or that normie, I think being able to lead them towards what it means to understand recovery, right? And be able to respect it. And, they don't necessarily have to have lived it, to be good support. They just kind of have to understand that we've been through some stuff. A lot of it was really difficult. And, being able to get to a place where we want to open up about it and we want to share about it and, live that positive life. It's a good thing. And I hope they embrace that. And I think it could also be really helpful, if there's any, family members or other supporters who haven't been through addiction themselves or anything like that. Um, Post questions, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. And there's a lot of resources also for families. Like there's Al-Anon and Nar-Anon, and those are essentially recovery, like support group type meetings, but for support people. So, just the same way that, one of our tools can be, these kinds of meetings, I think it can also be helpful for people who are supporters too, because certainly our, addictions didn't only affect us, right? It affects everybody around us, right? Everyone we touch sometimes even in life. And, I think being able to have an outlet for the support people to voice the difficulties they're going through, right? To hear hopeful stories of, other people who have done well, who are in long-term recovery, that kind of stuff. I think all of that is really important, and also just kind of learning more about recovery, because there's a lot to it. I remember in my early recovery, man, I felt so raw. I felt like everything was turned up to 11, and in reality, that was me, kind of peeling away the layers of my active addiction self and who I thought I was, and who I, to some degree, felt I had to be in that life, And when I took all those layers away, though, everything was kind of intense. I needed to take breaks often at like social events, and I had to really be careful, and that was an important step for me. So um yeah, I think if any of my supporters or normies out there, um if someone opens up to you about their recovery, whether it's positive or a struggle or whatever it is, just listen, just ask to hear more, right? Reflective listen, even, right? Active listen, right? Where we respond back with what we think we heard the person say, just to make sure everything's understood. We can really focus fully on what they're saying, and, go to a meeting with them, even, right? To celebrate them picking up time, for example, or, whatever that looks like support wise. But I think just being open to that concept of talking about recovery and talking about addiction, right? I have a son, he's 14, he's about to start high school, right? As a freshman. And we've had many conversations about, drugs and alcohol and all kinds of stuff, and I think the fact that he feels that he can bring these things up to me without being, judged or criticized or, any of that stuff. It's just a conversation, right? It's just a conversation about a safety concern in life, right? That's kind of how we view it. And I think just being able to keep it on that conversational kind of level, and, letting them know that that door is always open, right? I will always sit down and talk with him about whatever question, right? Because the reality of life at that age is that, sometimes people experiment, right? Sometimes people have a beer at a party, right? In high school. And it's important to not hide that, and to make them feel like if you do that, it's the end of the world. Because realistically, in my opinion, as a parent, things like that might happen in life. That's the honest reality of high school and teenagers, right? And I think that having that door open, allowing them to pick up that phone if they can't drive home and saying, I'm here for you, I will come pick you up, right? And we're also going to talk about this choice that you've made, right? But in a learning kind of way. Because I think that when we hide things, when we feel we have to have a double life in any way, I think that's where it gets dangerous, in my opinion, right? Because then it's, in my experience at least, it was all about, you know, living out this double life to the extreme, you know, and luckily I made it out the other side okay. A lot of people don't, especially these days with fentanyl and everything out there. So just remember to keep that door open, and I think viewing this whole addiction and recovery journey as a health issue and a learning period in time, right? All that kind of stuff, I think can make it a lot easier going through those times. By the way, I did also want to share small tangent. I'm going a little tangent here. I heard this really cool quote that I wanted to share, and here it goes. Do not cry over spilled milk. Find a use for the milk, and then invent a better milk carton. I love that. I love that, right? It's not just don't cry over spilled milk. It's no. Take that situation that's a negative, figure out how to find a positive within it, and plan for the future so that it doesn't happen again. And I find that so applicable to, addiction and recovery as well, right? Because sometimes people relapse, that can be part of people's stories. It doesn't have to be, right? But it can be. And I think, viewing it in that way of, yes, this thing happened, right? We're not going to beat ourselves up over it. We're not going to define our future based on that, right? We're not going to stay stuck in that, right? We're going to come back from it quickly, and we're going to figure out what happened, right? And then we're going to learn from it. We're going to, you put tools there, right? We're going to find out what situation was triggering for us, or, what caused that, so that in the future it doesn't happen again, and that's very much a, progress, not perfection point of view on that. I feel like sometimes people can get really down on themselves with that kind of stuff. And I think it can lend itself back to the stigma, that once an addict, always an addict, right? I don't believe that. Not at all. I got to tell you, I have met some of the most creative, smart, and compassionate people I've ever met in my life in the rooms, right? In these recovery meetings, and it's all about, what led us to that place. For me, I want to remember to always remain curious, because it seemed like in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden I was in treatment, right? And I'd thrown my career away in film, and I had, you know, at the time kind of ruined my life, honestly, and I needed to remain curious and open to what happened, right? And what happens in the future, so that I can see these potential, speed bumps in the road and prepare for them, and I think that that's kind of the best defense for me is, having those backup plans, right, is a means of controlling stress. So I urge you to try and, have a conversation with someone in recovery, or someone trying to get into recovery, right? Maybe it's a chronic relapser that and just showing up to them and saying, hey, you know what? I love you. I'm here for you. Whatever stage you're in, right? Whether you're using or not, I'm here, right? Because I understand that it's so much under the depths of that use that's going on with you. And I want to help support you through that, right? I want to help you find resources. I want to help you find that mixture of things that's helpful for your recovery, right? Whatever it is, a coach, therapy, meetings, whatever that looks like, right? I think showing up in that way and supporting people in that way can be really impactful, because we've tried this, war on drugs, this, arresting our way out of the problem, and it only makes it worse. We know that. We've seen the statistics. So I urge you also, if you're in recovery or you're trying to get into recovery, vocalize it, open up about it, because the worst thing that we can do as people in recovery is keep that to ourselves. It's the worst thing we can do. It sits there and it festers and it turns into something bigger if it's a negative issue, right? And I think also if you're, already in recovery, vocalize it, right? Maybe you want to dip your toe in slowly, right? Vocalize it to a close friend, right? Someone that you're fairly certain is going to take it well, you know? But by opening up and allowing others in and sharing your story with others, right? That makes it so that we don't have to hide anymore, right? In our active addiction, we were hiding all the time, and we want the complete opposite of our active addiction, right? So if we were hiding back then and getting away with stuff and being sneaky and blah, 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 now we want to do the opposite. We want to be transparent. We want to be vocal. We want to open up to others. We want to share what's going on with us, what troubles we have, what things we're feeling that are not okay. Because, make no mistake, those little things are not little, right? They might seem little in the moment, but addressing, for example, someone says something to you that you find a little bit offensive or whatever. There's a very easy way to just say, hey, you know what? I didn't appreciate the way you said that. Please don't do that again, right? Nothing mean about that. But what we did for ourselves in that moment was we were able to stand up for ourselves and protect what's important to us, protect how we feel, right? Be true to ourselves, And being able to do that with all the little small things will be so helpful for the future, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard people relapse because a whole bunch of little things turned into a big, massive snowball, took them out, you know? So it might seem little. It might seem like, oh, I can just minimize it. Oh, it's not a big deal, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I think while it's not a big deal, it's a good time to address it. And that's kind of the point, being able to vocalize those things for ourselves and stand up for ourselves, just like Mike Wagner spoke about, with his 44 years of sobriety. He mentioned that his biggest tool for getting to 44 years of sobriety was being worthy of taking really good care of himself, right? That has a lot of different implications to it, right? And I think that how we view ourselves even is taking care of ourselves, right? Kind of battling that inner critic, with some positive affirmations, right? Doing all those things. All of these little moving parts, they all affect one another, and it all affects the whole picture of recovery and life. So I urge you just to give it a shot. You might be surprised. You might say, oh, wow, I just got a new depth to this friendship by talking about this. Oh my God, they're in recovery too. Who would have known? Now we have this fantastic bond. We can go to meetings together, right? We can talk about these things. It's definitely a cornerstone of my own recovery today. I I share to the point sometimes even a little much. Like, for example, I remember when I had just gotten out of treatment and I went to this gas station, right? And I had just come from this community where it was very therapeutic. Everyone wanted you to open up and be honest and transparent. And, I was in that state of mind still, right? And, the guy behind the counter, he's like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I said, oh, man, I'm screwed up, dude. I thought this. I just got out of treatment. I just unloaded on this guy, right? And he, big old wide eyes open. He's like, oh, had no idea what to say to me in response. He was just like, oh, that'll be 340. Okay, get out of here. And in that moment, right, I didn't feel like, oh, now I need to hide my recovery because that person didn't respond well, right? No, not at all. No, that person got the honest truth, and maybe they weren't, quite ready for that, but I gave that to them, so in that moment it ended up being a funny thing that I remember. And you might have situations come up like that, and just laugh it off. It's no big deal, right? If some person doesn't understand or doesn't respond to us to the depths that we want, vocalize that, right? Like if you're having a conversation with someone and you share something really deep and intimate and they're ready for that, they're prepared for that, right? But maybe they don't necessarily respond in the way you were hoping, voice that, say, hey, I feel like I just shared something pretty deep. Maybe we can talk more about that. I'd like to explore that further with you. Um, so yeah, I urge everyone to try that. Try opening up. Try battling that stigma in that way. Because in reality, you know, once you get into long-term recovery, it's kind of like a superpower, and I genuinely believe that because it's given me the ability to stop and refocus my entire life, right? There's some things I was able to restart from the ground up, other things I was able to build upon and continue, but it's genuinely hitting that reset button and saying, okay, I got to get all this negative, heavy drama and baggage that I've been carrying for years. I got to get it off me. Now that I'm open, right? Now I'm feeling lighter. I got all that stuff out. I've worked through all that stuff. Now I can add some new stuff in. I think that's where a lot of the gifts come from. We've been able to, purge ourselves of all that negativity and all those, bad situations. And we're actively working on improving, all those things and doing that hard work, So if you're ever feeling, down or anything like that, give yourself a pat on the back for that at least, because this is hard work. This whole recovery journey is very difficult, but it's also the most worthwhile thing I've ever done. The ability to truly reclaim my life, to not have to hide behind a facade anymore. It's amazing. It's truly impactful. So I urge you to try recovering out loud, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be talking about all that stuff, right? You could wear a recovery shirt. You could, if you hear someone else talking about recovery, you could say, "Hey, how you doing, man? I'm a friend of Bill W as well," kind of thing, and which means, Bill W was, one of the people who wrote the Alcoholics Anonymous book, right? And if you say you're a friend of Bill W, that means, hey, I'm in recovery, that kind of thing. By the way, a little secret sort of deal. If you're ever in an airport and you feel like you are going to have a drink or a drug, or you're just having a hard time or whatever, go to that little mic paging thing that they got at all the airports, and say, "Hey, I'm looking to talk to Bill W. I'll be over here at the whatever." And if there's anyone else in recovery, they'll know, "Oh, that's Bill W. Right. Yeah, that's a person who needs to talk." And they'll come find you, Same thing at concerts, right? Next time you're at a concert, look for the big white balloons, look for that's like the sober section, and depending on the concert, I believe it's fish or something jammy, something granola-y, you know what I mean? Um, they even have like a pretty good sober following too. Like they have tents with meetings and people to talk to, and you can go jump around by the white balloons and just get wild without having to worry about someone, trying to pass something your direction or whatever. So it's a really strong community, and I think the more that we can open up to it and look for it, I think the better it is for everyone, because we need people in recovery. And, it's important to know that you're not alone and to say something when you need help, right? Because sometimes it can be hard to pick up that phone and say, "Hey, man, I need some help," right? That takes vulnerability, right? Sometimes that can be hard as a man, or as anyone for that matter, right? Because we weren't necessarily raised to be vulnerable. We were raised to, pull up your bootstraps and get to it, that kind of thing, right? But we don't have to live by that. We can change that for ourselves and, open up and be okay, So I urge you to give it a shot, and any questions, comments, whatever, leave them down below, and I'd love to address them. And yeah, I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for stopping in.